we're looking for early opportunities to commercialize, perhaps closer to the 10 amp hour scale that we're currently at, because ultimately, that's what we're interested in is freezing a product design and starting to generate revenue from that.
Hello, you're watching Proactive. I'm joined by Ilika CEO Graeme Purdy. Graeme, great to speak with you again. And you're out with your half-year report to the end of October today, and you've hit lots of milestones. Stereax moved from qualification into initial production. What does that change in practical terms for customers and for your revenues?
Well, it's very exciting that we're able to resume deliveries of our Stereax batteries. Remember, if you go back a couple of years before we initiated the tech transfer to Cirtec Medical, we were delivering evaluation samples of Stereax batteries from our pilot line. We've helped Cirtec set up this production line across in the US. And of course, just before Christmas, we were able to resume deliveries. So those customers are delighted to be able to get the physical product again and resume their engineering activities. And of course, starting to build in the Stereax batteries to their technology platforms and their applications.
And of course, you've had your first sale as well.
Well, to your question on revenues, yeah, just yesterday we were able to announce that we've had the first follow-on order for electrodes, which is part of the manufacturing process we've retained here in the UK, and of course that's generating revenue that it'll go on to our P&L.
On Goliath, customers have now validated both your 2 amp hour and your 10 amp hour cells. What's the most important feedback you're getting at this stage, Graeme?
Well, the 2 amp hour cells were ones that we sent out actually in 2024, and we received feedback on those last year, actually at the beginning of the first half of the financial year that we're currently in. And that feedback was really useful to us. It sort of pointed out the strengths and weaknesses of the technology. And it also, there was that great quote that we got from a tier one developer that said, look, we're in that leading cohort of solid state battery developers. So that was very reassuring to know that our product is on track to be competitive relative to some of the offerings that are out there. We've now scaled up 5 times, right, from 2 amp hours to 10 amp hours. And those batteries are currently with a series of customers, including some of the same OEMs and tier ones. And we're looking for further validation because we're now in that zone where actually the 10 amp hours is of a size that is credible for integration into modules and packs.
I mean, the 10 amp hour Goliath cells promise big savings on cost and weight, Graeme. How close does that put you to something an EV maker could actually adopt?
Yeah, I mean, you need to have a compelling proposition because people who have invested a lot of money in gigafactories or perhaps have got relationships in the supply chain for the secure supply of competitively priced batteries, they're looking for something that's a real differentiator, and that's why that £2,500 or $3,000 for those watching in color, that saving in the battery pack is really a driver for that, as well as the increase in range, right? 20% reduction in weight and commensurate increase in range, and then that reduction in charge time. So a third of the charge time taken off from 18 minutes down to 12 minutes. So very compelling value proposition to designers of vehicles.
Graeme, grant funding has been key, but revenues are still modest. How do you balance funding, cash burn, and momentum as you scale up?
Yeah, as you say, the grant funding has been really important. We currently got an active grant program that we call Primed, that is managed by the Advanced Propulsion Centre, who are tasked here in the UK with overseeing that energy transition in automotive, from ICEs to electric vehicles. And actually, what that funding has allowed us to do is collaborate. So, as you know, we've got Jaguar Land Rover who are involved in that program, giving us some steering advice. We've got advice from Professor Paul Shearing at the University of Oxford, one of the leading thinkers in lithium-ion battery safety in particular. And also, it allows us to work together with the UK BIC, so the UK Battery Industrialization Centre, who are manufacturing some of the cathodes and the cathode electrolyte and anode components that go into our devices.
Looking ahead into 2026, Graeme, what needs to go right for Ilika to move from evaluation programs into real commercial traction?
Well, what we're interested in the coming year is, first of all, getting some positive feedback on the 10 ampere cells that we sent out for validation, and making sure that if we need to go through another iteration at that scale, then we emphasize the unique selling points and properties of that cell design for some of the applications that we've got in mind. And then, agreeing a minimum viable products with customers. So we've previously indicated that we may go as far as a 50 amp hour pouch cell as our minimum viable product. We're looking for early opportunities to commercialize perhaps closer to the 10 amp hour scale that we're currently at, because ultimately, that's what we're interested in is freezing a product design and starting to generate revenue from that. And then, of course, getting that manufacturing scale-up partnership, much in the same way that we've got it already in place with Cirtec for Stereax, looking for a similar sort of deal on the Goliath side.
Great. Thank you very much for the update. Good speaking with you as always.
Thank you. Speak soon.
Graeme Purdy is the CEO of Ilika.